We can now proceed to add some details to the mask and to the body by painting some textures there. That's why we did the UV unwrapping in the first place. And as a first step, I would switch to the texture paint workspace that's available here. That will just make things easier, and we have some workspace set up with the texture on the left here. And now I want to follow the reference provided so we can better see what details we are going to do. And we don't really need the outline editor here, so we can switch here to image editor and load up the reference right here so we see what we are going for. So let's just click open image and navigate to the file with the reference, and you can help yourself by switching this to thumbnails. And here is the original reference, so I will load up the image here and let's zoom this out. So this is the mask that we want to paint. This looks like a really simple paint over. We won't be following all the details. I want to maintain some level of detail there. Of course, if you want, you can paint whatever you want. You can come up with your own paint designs. I really encourage that. This is a nice place where you can express your creativity in some way and make this model more your own than following the exact steps I provide here. So now with the reference loaded here, we can proceed with the painting. Just one little side note here, I won't be using a tablet here or a pen display. I will be using mouse, so the result might not be perfect, but I want to show you that even though if you don't have a tablet on hand, this kind of painting can be done in a simple way with the mouse as well. So now the first thing you need to do when you want to paint over something is to have a material in place. So let's just switch to the material tab here. You can see there's an empty list, so we can click new and name this mask. So right now we have a material ready for painting, and I want to bring out new window here. So if you go all the way to the corner right there and drag up, you can bring out a new window. And let's switch this to shader editor right here. We can see what material we have created. It's a standard principled shader that gets created when you create some material. And this is just to see what will happen when we use these painting tools right here. So let's switch to the toolbar right there. We have all bunch of texture painting options here, and you can see we have no textures here. So we basically can't paint on anything. And one more thing to note, when we switched to the texture paint workspace, we already jumped into texture paint mode. So these are two different things. Remember, these workspaces are just defining how your viewport looks, how many windows you have, and what tools you have at hand ready. But at the same time, these modes, you can switch them in whatever workspace how you want. So if you go to the object mode, this is a standard viewport where you can select objects. But by switching to the texture paint, you already got switched to the texture paint mode right here. Or you can use the Control Tab to switch through these modes. So let's go back to the texture paint mode, and right now we have these drawing options available, and we can see there are no textures here. So let's click the plus icon here, and it will ask you what channel you want this texture to connect to. And if you expect this shader here, there are a bunch of channels like the base color, roughness, and basically you are picking what channel you want this texture to be connected to. So right now we will just pick the base color here, and here we got this little window, and we need to fill out some details like the size of the texture, and I really recommend going 4K here. Later, if you want to use more optimized version of the model, it's really easy to scale down the texture, but it's hard to scale it up if you paint in low resolution. So I really recommend to go something like 4096 pixels here, and we can leave other options as is and just click OK, and you will see that the purple color disappeared, so we have connected the texture successfully. And right here in the shader editor, you can see that the new texture slot was created, the new texture node, and the new texture as well, which is called mask base color. It will always take the name of your material into account and then the name of the channel you picked here. But please mind, this texture is not saved anywhere. Right now it exists only within the Blender file data. So first of all, we can display this texture right here, because on the left you can see there's no texture loaded here. We can see only the UV setup there. So let's click this icon here and let's load up the mask base color. Now if we zoom out a little bit, we can see the texture we are painting on. And there's a little asterisk here on the image menu, and that means it's not saved. So I strongly recommend saving this right away. You can see the shortcut is Alt-S or Shift-Alt-S to save as. So if you hover over this image and press Alt-S, you will get a dialog for saving the file. And I already have some of these textures here, so I will save this as mask base color 1. So I have a new copy, save as image. And just now the setup for the painting is complete. We have a material with the shader, there's a texture connected to it, and the texture is actually saved on the hard drive, so it won't get lost. Now if you try to paint over this object, you will see that this works, and you can see that the white color got applied here as well. So let me go back one step here. But there's one more little thing here. You can see, if we go to the modifiers panel, you can see that the mask still has the bevel and subdivision modifiers. So if I go to the object mode and tap into the edit mode, you can see that this is still a fairly low poly object, and we unwrapped it like this, and this might cause a little bit of a problem when you have a bevel modifier and then subdivision modifier. So we are using the bevel modifier to create these supporting loops that control the subdivision modifier, but this is not included in the UV maps. So if you paint over the object that's subdivided and has a bevel modifier and you have the unwrap done on the low poly model, it can create a little glitches, dents here and there. Color might bleed from one UV island to another and stuff like that, and I really want to avoid that right here. So first of all, what we can do is, in the object mode, let's press Shift D to duplicate the mask, then release with the right mouse button, press M, and move this into the backup collection, so we can return to it in case something goes wrong and we need to edit the mask. And right now I will select the mask and apply the bevel modifier. So if we now tap into the edit mode, you can see we have these supporting edges from the bevel modifier baked into our mesh. The subdivided mesh still looks the same, and right now we can just go into the edit mode. We can press A to select all, press U and Smart UV Project once again, but I want to increase the island margin here from 0 to something like 0.2. And you will see what that does if we now zoom in. So you can see here these islands are a little bit more separated, so if we need to paint over those, the color won't bleed from one to another. So this is, I think, important step to avoid some paint glitches and stuff like that. Right now we can switch back to the texture paint mode. We have our UVs ready, we still have our texture ready for painting. So switch back to the drawing mode, and I will reduce the size of the brush. You can do this with F, but right now I don't want to use brush, I want to use the paint bucket. So select the fill here, and sometimes you can see when you click on the texture somewhere, it might get changed in all of the image editors here, so you will have to click this icon here and switch to the original reference manually. It's kind of a nuisance here and there, but we'll have to do this sometimes. And now with the paint bucket ready, we can just click the color right here, select the eyedropper and pick the color right from the image editor. You can do this all over the screen wherever you want. So pick the brown color here, and now we can just click the mask to paint everything brown like this. And the next step should be painting these larger yellow parts, since they won't require any manual painting, and you will see why. If we go now to the edit mode by pressing tab, you can see we can select these separate faces. So I will press 3, select this face, go all over up here, hold Control and select this loop, and continue with holding Control and close the selection like this. And right now we can use Control plus to expand the selection, and it will expand sometimes only a little because we have those supporting loops now in the mesh. So we'll need to Control plus few more times and one more here. We don't want to go all over to the last supporting loop right here, so we want to end up here in the middle. And now with this selected, we can tab out. The selection is still active in the edit mode, and here is a little icon that can enable painting mask. If you click that, you will see how this part got isolated. And now, since this got switched once again, so I will switch this back to the reference, we can now select the color and pick the yellow color with the eyedropper tool and just click the nose here, and it will get painted only for those selected faces in the edit mode. So we can repeat this process for the teeth here down as well, and just select these front faces by holding Shift, and we'll press Control plus to expand on that selection right up here. Now tab out and just click to paint over those as well. So these are the larger parts, and one last thing to do is to paint over the eye sockets. So let's just select those by holding Shift. Let's press Control plus a few times to expand that selection, and now we can zoom in to see where we got, and we want one less that's visible right here. So we are again in the middle of those supporting loops, and now tab out. We'll switch this to the black color by dragging the slider all over here and clicking with the left mouse button. You can see how this got painted over these islands nicely. And if you got closer, if this would be touching the island here, there will be some weird color bleed between those. So right now we can go back into the edit mode by pressing tab, and we'll need to select those front faces. So with the face select still active, I will just click this face right here, and by holding Control select this loop. And now Shift click here and Control click here to select the other one as well. I will now select additionally these faces, and once again by holding Control I will select the whole loop, so we have this front part selected. But don't forget about the supporting loop. So if we now press Control plus, we will expand one loop. And now if we tab back into the texture paint mode, we have this part selected for painting. I will switch back to the reference, and we'll need to paint these things here. And since I'm not using the tablet or anything, I want to do this with mouse, so I can demonstrate how this can be done without using any additional hardware or anything like that. So we can now press 1 on the numpad for the front view, zoom in a little bit, and let's switch here to the drawing brush, and we can modify it a little bit so it's ready for painting. First of all, I will need to select that blue color we can see on the reference. So select the color, pick the eyedropper tool and pick that blue color you can see right there. And if we now paint over this, you can see this works, but I don't like these soft edges here. I want to get rid of those. So if we go here to the brush settings and find the fall off option, you can see you can paint basically the graph, how the softness of the brush behaves. And you have some presets here. We want this preset so we don't have any curve, and right now we can draw with the sharp brush with nice fidelity on the edges there. So let me go back one step. And one more thing we can use here if you don't want to do this manually, if we now reduce the brush size by pressing F and moving the mouse up and down to something like this. If you don't want to do this manually like that, or it's hard for you with the mouse, you can go to the stroke and change the stroke method from space to line, and right now you can just drag the line and it will get painted. So that's a very useful trick. But before I paint this in, there's one more setting we can help ourselves with, and we can paint these lines and these white markings symmetrically, and there is an option for symmetry right down here. If you click the X, you will symmetrize your painting over the x-axis, and you can find the same setting up here. If you scroll, you will see those symmetry options right there, and that's very similar to those symmetry options you can find in the modeling or editing the armature or something like that. So very useful thing. And right now we can click and drag the blue line so it's symmetrically got painted on both sides. And now I want to pick up that red color, so let me scroll here a little bit and use the eyedropper tool to pick that red color. And there's a little bit of a slope on the blue line here. You will see that this is more narrow than here on the outside, so I want to do something like this and maybe a little bit more. So there's that kind of a slope, and for the red as well here. And maybe I've gone too much here, so we can easily sample the color by holding S from the blue color here and paint over this as well. So again, if you need to quickly sample the color from your viewport, you just hold S and hover over these colors and the color will get picked. So I think something like this could work. And we can now zoom out a little bit more, and let's switch to the white color. You can just slide this all over and reduce the hue and saturation to get the white color. And with F, we can reduce the size of the brush stroke to be able to create these markings here, like that. And right now I want to create this thing right here that's curved a little bit. And again, I'm not using tablet, so this will be a little bit hard, but I'll try my best, and I will reduce the size of this. And let's switch this from line to space again. And now I will start drawing right here and do the curve. And one more here. And we can try to simulate the brush stroke by going here and widening the stroke as we go more here, so it looks not that uniform. Okay, that looks fine in my opinion. And right now all we need to do is to do the bottom part here, but for that I want to disable the symmetry here, so I will disable the X symmetry. Look from the front again, and now we can sample the red color from here and increase the brush size by pressing F and dragging with the mouse, and just paint it like this. Don't worry about the precision, because we will fix this right away. Because now if we change the color and use S to sample the color from the blue, now we can switch this back to the line, reduce the size of the brush, and paint this line over here, which will create those nice edges. And I think this looks quite alright. And basically we are almost done. There are just some things here at the top, so let's sample the white color here, and let's use this line, and we can again enable symmetry for those and click and drag to paint those triangles in here as well. And now there are just some blue dots, so sample the blue color there, increase the brush size, and do some dots. And use F to decrease the size of the brush once again, and one more dot here. So yeah, this is painting the mask basically. Again, you can do whatever you want if you feel creative and you want to do this completely differently. That's all up to you. Go ahead, have some fun with this. Now we can disable the painting mask, so we better see what we have here. And don't forget to save, so I will press Ctrl S to save and Alt S hovering over this image editor, so it got saved on the hard drive as well. We can now switch back to the layout view, and here we don't see anything because right now we are in the solid view, but we don't need to enable material preview to be able to see textures. Just expand the shading options here, and for the colors in the solid shaded viewport, you can easily choose texture as well. So every object will be gray, but those that have texture, you will see the texture on them, which is very helpful because we don't stress the computer by rendering the material preview, but at the same time we are able to view our textures. So that was the mask, and let's move on to the next part.